let's learn about subject-verb agreement. So, subject-verb agreement can be defined as an agreement between a subject and verb when you make a sentence or when you make a statement. So, let's look into a little more details of what it is. So, in subject-verb agreement, there is always a basic rule. A base rule is always called as a rule that all the rules are derived from. So basically, a single subject will always take a singular verb form, and wherein a plural subject always takes a plural verb form. So that means, if you look at the example here, the list of items is /r on the desk. If you know the list is the subject, then you will choose is for the verb form. Typically, what we're trying to say here is, if you look at the statements here, the first example, the list of items, that means on the sentence, you have a subject in the form of plural. However, the subject is been replaced by a collective noun called as list. So when we have a list of items, that means the list becomes a singular. Henceforth, we apply is instead of are. So typically, that's the base rule. So if in case if you have the items is/are on the desk, then it definitely going to be are instead of is, because that's what the base rule always says. A singular subject takes a singular verb, whereas a plural subject takes a plural verb. So considering this basic rule, we would go ahead and look into the other rules and how it's being done. Rule number 1. A subject will come before a phrase beginning with of. This is a key rule for understanding subjects. The word of is the culprit in many, perhaps most subject-verb mistakes. So let's look at the little more examples here. The first example, a bouquet of yellow roses lend color and fragrance to the room, and a bouquet of yellow roses lends color and fragrance to the room. So according to these two statements, one says it's incorrect and the other one says correct. So the difference between the incorrect and the correct one is primarily the letter S for the word lend. Why? And when we look at the question why, so if you look at the statement, a subject will come before a phrase beginning with of. So what is the phrase that is coming before of is bouquet, and the subject here is yellow roses. So when we look at the yellow roses is a plural. However, yellow roses is put in a bouquet, that becomes a singular. When you are using a singular subject, you always use a singular verb form. Based on that rule, whenever you add a word, a letter S to a verb, that becomes a singular verb form. Henceforth, a bouquet of yellow roses lends color and fragrance to the room. Always remember, whenever you add an S form to a verb, that becomes a singular verb form. So moving on, rule number 2. Two singular subjects connected by or, either or, neither nor, always require a singular verb. Pretty much says whenever you're using two singular subjects, you always, which are connected by or either neither nor, you always end up using singular verb. For example, my uncle or my aunt is arriving by train today. Neither Juan nor Carmen is available. Either Kiana or Casey is helping today with stage decorations. So this is a very simple rule. So I hope it's very clear and self-explanatory. Let's move ahead. Rule number 3. The verb in an or, either or neither nor sentence agrees with the noun or pronoun closest to it. So what it means is whenever you're using a verb in an or in a situation where we use verbs in an or either or neither nor, sentence should always agree with the noun or pronoun closest to it. So let's look at the example to understand this statement a little better. Neither the plates nor the serving bowl goes on that shelf. Neither the serving bowl nor the plates go on that shelf. So typically, if you look at the first statement here, neither the plates is again a plural, nor the serving bowl. Serving bowl is singular. So and the verb is next to the singular. So henceforth, as per the rule and as per the statement, we use a verb form which is relevant to the singular subject. So henceforth, serving bowl is singular. So we go ahead and use an S form to make it goes on that shelf. And in the second statement, neither the serving bowl nor the plates. So in the second statement, we have the first subject as singular and the second subject as plural. And the second subject is closest to the verb. Henceforth, we go with the plural verb form in the second sentence, which is just go. As I said in earlier, whenever you add S to a verb form, you make the verb into a singular form. Always remember this. So this rule can lead to bumps in the road. For example, if slash is one of the two more subjects, it could lead to this odd sentence. For example, neither she, my friends, nor I am going to the festival. If possible, it's best to revert such grammatically correct but awkward sentences. So the better form would be, what it says is whenever you have these many subjects, then it gets a little awkward, though it's grammatically correct. However, in order to make it better, you can say neither she, I, or my friends are going to the festival, or she, my friends, and I are going to the festival. I'd say put yourself at the last in any of these kind of sentences. That makes your life easier. Now, rule number 4, as a general rule, use a plural verb with 2 or more subjects when they're connected by and. Again, a very simple rule. Whenever you're using 2 different subjects connected by and, you always use a plural verb form. A car and a bike are my means of transportation. But there are always a certain exceptions for these kind of rules. So when we look at the first example, what it says when we are using 2 different subjects, but then what if you're using 2 different verbs or action words to form a sentence, and what kind of verb form are you going to use? Exceptions are breaking and entering is against the law. The bed and breakfast was charming. Again, if you look at the exceptions here, whenever you use a verb and looked at it as an action of one, so it's always used in singular verb form, right? So basically breaking and entering, that's like a robbery, right? When you're trying to get into robbing something, you break and then enter. Bed and breakfast, you go to the hotel and you book the bed and breakfast. So that's also is considered as a one thing. So henceforth, we always consider a singular verb form. In other words, it's primarily the compound nouns. So moving on, rule number 5. Sometimes the subject is separated from the verb, such as words as along with, as well as, besides, not, etc. These words and phrases are not part of the subject. Ignore them and use a singular verb when the subject is singular. Basically, whenever you're trying to use words in a statement which is separated with words like along with, or as well as, besides, not, etc., you always go ahead and use a singular verb form, no matter where the sentence is, no matter what kind of verb that we use there. The politician, for example, the politician along with the newsman is expected shortly. Excitement as well as nervousness is the cause for shaking. So again, it's pretty straight. So whenever you use these kind of words above, so hence always go ahead and use a singular verb form. So 5b is nothing but whenever parenthesis is not part of the subject. So pretty much when you're making a sentence, Joe was always welcome. If this seemed awkward, they try rewriting the sentence. So basically, in the sentence out there, you just don't consider parenthesis as a part of subject. Rule number 6, in sentences beginning with here or there, the true subject follows the verb. There are 4 hurdles to jump. There is a high hurdle to jump. Here are the keys. Basically what it says is in the sentences beginning with here or there, so the true subject always follows the verb. The true subject is nothing but whatever the subject, what we're referring to in the sentence. So in the first sentence, we are referring to 4 hurdles. Again, 4 is again a plural, right? So we have there are. In the second sentence, there is a high hurdle. Again, a high hurdle is again a singular. Henceforth, we use a singular verb form. When the third one, here are the keys. Again, are is a plural, keys is the plural. Yep. Moving on. So rule number 7, use a singular verb with distances, periods of time, sums of money, etc. when considered as a unit. It's a very straightforward rule whenever you use any sort of any sort of units like distances or periods of time or sums of money or anything which is relevant to the unit, which is measurable. You always go ahead and use a singular verb form. For example, 3 miles is too far to walk. 5 years is the maximum sentence for that offense. $10 is the high price to pay. So, but then if you're talking about coins, then it could be $10 bills were scattered on the floor, right? So that's just a little bit of difference because we're talking about the coins there. Now, rule number 8, with words that indicate proportions, example, a lot, a majority, some, all. Rule number 1 given earlier in this section is reversed, and we are guided by the noun after of. If the noun after of is singular, use a singular verb. If it is plural, use a plural verb. So examples, a lot of pie has disappeared. A lot of the pies have disappeared. A third of the city is unemployed. A third of the people are unemployed. All of the pie is gone. All of the pies are gone. Some of the pie is missing. Some of the pies are missing. Again, if you look at the examples here, we use the same words which we took as an example: a lot, a majority, a third of the city, some of the people, or all of the people. So wherever you have a plural, we use the plural verb form. Wherever you have a singular, we have a singular verb form. Pretty straightforward rule, very simple. So just remember these rules. Rule number 9. Again, with collective nouns such as group, jury, family, audience, population, the verb might be singular or plural depending on the writer's intent. So what we're trying to say is whenever we use collective nouns, such as primarily the words like group, jury, family, audience, population, and the verb is not a prominent thing because it primarily goes with the writer's intent. All of my family have arrived or has arrived. Again, it depends on the intent. Most of the jury is here or are here. A third of the population was not in a favor or were not in a favor of the bill. So it's totally up to the writer how he wants to go ahead and put that verb form in situations where we use these particular words as collective nouns. Rule number 10. The word were replaces was in a sentences that expresses a wish or a contrary fact. If, for example, if Joe were here, he would be sorry. Basically, the rule number 10 is all about a hypothetical situation where the situation is imaginary or a wish or a contrary to fact. So that's when we use were instead of was. So if it's a past situation or an instance, we primarily use was. If it's something that did not happen, or if you wish to happen, or if it's something hypothetical or something contrary to the fact, then we would go ahead and use were. So if Joe were here, you would be sorry. So that's the motto. For example, if I were to be at the movie yesterday, I would have enjoyed a lot. So primarily I'm saying if I was at the movie with you guys yesterday, then I would have had fun too. So primarily that situation really did not happen. So I'm just assuming if I were to be there, right? So anything which is hypothetical, you would always make this kind of statement. Shouldn't Joe be followed by was, not were, given the Joe is the singular? But Joe isn't actually here, so we say were, not was. The sentence demonstrates the subjunctive mood, which is used to express things that are hypothetical, wishful, imaginary, or factually contradictory. The subjunctive mood pairs singular subjects with what we usually think of as plural verbs. Let's look at the some more examples for rule number 10. I wish it were Friday. She requested that he raise his hand. In the first example, a wishful statement, not a fact, and it is being expressed. Therefore, were, which we usually think of as plural verb, is used with the singular. So normally, he raise would sound terrible to us. However, in the second example, where a request is being expressed, the subjunctive mood is correct. So the subjunctive mood is losing ground in spoken English, but should still be used in formal speech and writing. So keep that in mind. Rule number 11. When the prepositional phrases separate the subjects from the verbs, they have no effect on the verbs. So primarily, whenever you have a preposition, a phrase that is separating the subjects, they have no effect on the verbs. So a study on African countries shows that 80% of the people of this continent live below the poverty line. So basically what we're trying to say here is a prepositional phases, whenever they separate the verbs, there is no much effect of a verb form. So that's one of the reason you see here a study on is again a preposition. African countries shows, right, singular verb form, that 80% of the people, again which is a plural there, of this continent live below the poverty line. The perspective of different people varies from time to time. The fear of terrorists and militants has made them flee the city. So rule number 11 is very simple and straight. Let's move on to rule number 12. Some nouns are always plural. These nouns have two parts. My pants are in drawer. My eyeglasses are dirty. These scissors are useless. So basically there are certain nouns which are always plural. So henceforth you would go ahead and use a plural verb form. If these words are preceded by the phrase a pair of, they will be regarded as a singular subject. A pair of pants is needed. So basically whenever we say a pair of glasses or a pair of pants, then we would consider it as a singular verb form. Like again, we go back to the rule number 1 by putting in a collective noun or something as such. Moving on, rule number 13. A number of noun is a plural subject and it takes a plural verb. The plural number of noun is a singular subject and it takes a singular verb. A number of dancers are coming to the party, indefinite numbers plural. A number of dancers coming to the party is 12, definite number of dancers. A number of people prefer cricket to football. A number of days in the month is 28. So when we are not definite, then we primarily go ahead and use a verb form which is plural when it's a plural subject. Sometimes when it's a plural subject and the number is definite, we would end up using is to be more specific. So moving on, rule number 14. If positive an adjective appears as a subject of a sentence, it will be plural. The pious are loved by God. The industrious are always not successful. The best do not lack integrity. So primarily when you have an adjective, it's always considered that you would go ahead and use a plural verb form, the positive adjective. Rule number 15. None is a singular subject when it is used alone. When it is used with the prepositional phrase starting with of, the subject can be both plural and singular. So primarily what we're trying to say here is there is nothing called a singular subject when it's used alone. When it's used with the preposition phrase of starting with of, the subject can be both plural and singular. When we start a sentence with none as a singular subject and there is a such and that's before an of, the subject can be both plural or singular. None of the money has been used. None of the teachers wants failure for students. When primarily whenever you use a word none in front of the preposition of, the subject can be either plural or singular. That's what the example defines here. None of the money has been used. None of the teachers wants failure for students. None of the students want to fail. None of the bottles are clean enough to keep water. None plus plural noun takes a plural verbs. Example, no men are hungry now. So that's about the subject verb agreement.